So today, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce our speaker, Rabbi David Freilich, OAM. If I had to tell you all about Rabbi Freilich and his achievements, you would have to spend the entire hour listening to me, which is not why you are here. So I'm going to be very brief. Rabbi Freilich was born in Sydney and a few years ago retired after 28 years as the chief rabbi of the Perth Hebrew congregation.
30 years.
30. Okay. His career in between spanned decades and continents, and he was the first Sydney-born congregational rabbi in Sydney, spending 15 years as the spiritual leader of the Maroubra synagogue. He has received smicha from numerous yeshivot, as well as several university degrees. His list of appointments and honors is unending, but today he is going to share with us his reminiscences of growing up in the great synagogue. Without any further ado, I'm thrilled to hand the microphone over to Rabbi David Freilich.
Lovely. And I must say how honored I am to have been invited to actually share my reminiscences with all of you tonight, this afternoon. It's also afternoon here in Perth as it is there, so I just want to remember that. Can I just say this to you, that I actually had a chance to listen to Rabbi Elton give a wonderful, I thought it was a wonderful address, was it last week, on women rabbis. And I really thought that was, it gave me a chance because I wanted to see what this group was. So I tuned in and heard the video of it. And I must say it was great. And I thought, I phoned him up on Friday and told him that. But, you know, had I been listening live, I actually would have said something. I would have actually shared a story I heard from Rabbi Riskin, because you were all discussing about women rabbis, what a woman Orthodox rabbi should be called in that discussion. And I remember a discussion with Rabbi Riskin when he gave a talk once, and Rabbi Riskin just received smicha. He just received his rabbinical ordination from Yeshiva University. And he was coming along, and he was actually congratulated by his rabbi from the synagogue that he used to belong to and used to go as a child. And he was congratulated by that rabbi. So the rabbi's wife, who was a very clever woman, said to Rabbi Riskin, and he was a young man, just graduated, said to Rabbi Riskin, I want to tell you, young man, young rabbi, I want to tell you, you think that he's the rabbi, you think that I'm the Rebbitzin because he's the rabbi. I want to tell you, here's your first lesson. He's the rabbi because I'm the Rebbitzin. So this has bearing on my first memory, because the truth of the matter is that I owe the great synagogue my Rebbitzin. I owe the great synagogue my Rebbitzin. I get quite emotional. My meeting of Viva was at the GSY, Great Synagogue Youth Camp. They used to have youth camps every year, wonderful youth camps. In fact, my father, who was the head of the youth committee of the board of the Great Synagogue. My father was on the board of the Great Synagogue and arranged these youth camps. They're out at Stanwell Tops. And that is the first time I met Aviva. in 1972. I'm sorry, 1967. It was before I was going to England to study at Jews College. And I met Aviva there. And as a result of that, we lost contact for 5 years because I was at Jews College in London. And then when I came back, I used to come back every year to participate at the Great Synagogue Overflow service, because there was a break in London. Of course, you had the summer vacation. So I used to come back to the Great Synagogue to just do some practical rabbinical things as a student. And I used to conduct the service at the Overflow service. I used to go upstairs and blow the shofar for them in the main shul at Daven Shachris there. And what happened was 5 years after I'd been at Jews College and I lost contact with Aviva, I'm at the Great Synagogue. She actually belonged to the Central Synagogue, but she came in especially to the Great that in 1972. So I was blowing the shofar on the bima there at the top in the main shul, and I looked up. I looked up with a shofar, and then suddenly I saw Aviva in the crowd in the middle row of the Great Synagogue, and I'm blowing the shofar there, and suddenly there she was. So I started to blow my own trumpet. and was about from that Rosh Hashanah until Sukkot. On Sukkot we were engaged. So I'm just telling you, I met Aviva, and so indeed when I say I'm the Rebbitzin, because I'm the rabbi because she's the Rebbitzin, I owe the great synagogue to that Rebbitzin who's made me the rabbi. So that's the first memory, the first thanks I give to the great synagogue. You know, I'm actually reminded of I'm a great Beatle fan, and coming from that era, and I'm reminded of a song. There are places I remember, and it says there are places I remember. You probably all know the song. Those some have changed, some forever, some for better, some have gone, and some remain. All these places have their moments of lovers and friends I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life, I love them all. Because the truth of the matter is that I have so many wonderful memories of the great synagogue. I have so many wonderful memories. And I'm reminded of a saying by Oscar Wilde, who said, memory is the diary we all carry with us in our hearts. And let me tell you, what does that mean? I often draw on those experiences I actually had at the great synagogue in my life. So I owe so much to the great synagogue. Can I just share with you a few of those experiences? Firstly, and I recall it was about 10 years ago now, 12 years ago, I actually was at the great synagogue in November, and I was just by coincidence, I went to Sydney Grammar School, which is just, of course, up the road from the great synagogue. So I was there for my 40th anniversary of my graduating year at Sydney Grammar School, and it just so happened that was my father's yahrzeit and that Shabbat, and I stayed in the city because they were having the gathering of all those fellow students at the school itself, and it was a daylight saving, so Saturday night was the event, so I could walk over. I stayed at the hotel next door to the synagogue, so I could walk over to the great synagogue, to the school. And what happened was, I'm there in the morning for my father's yahrzeit, sitting in the exact seat where I used to sit with my father in the great synagogue. And Rabbi Jeremy Lawrence was the rabbi at the time. And of course, I'm invited up to have an aliyah because it's my father's yahrzeit. And Jeremy says to me, Rabbi Freilich, would you like to give the drosha as I'm coming down? And I hadn't really prepared anything. So I said to him, oh, Jeremy, I need time to think what I'm going to say. I've only got 10 minutes to prepare. So I went down, sat in my father's seat again, and I could hear my father saying to me, as he always did, the rabbi's asked you to do something. You're not doing it, David. You should have said yes to the rabbi. I can hear him saying that to me. So I went up to Jeremy and said, I'll give the drosha. I'll give the drosha. Listen, it was actually Parshas Vayetze, where Jacob leaves his parents' home to run away from Esau, and on those words it says he went Vayetze and he went to Haran. He went out and he went to Haran. And Rashi gives an interesting comment there and says, this is the drosha I gave. Why does it say he went out and went to Haran? Why does it say he went to Haran? Why he went out? Because Rashi explains, when anybody goes out from a place, when you actually go out from a place where you've left an impression, then that impression always remains there. And I sat on the pulpit, and at that drosha, and I went to each seat in the great synagogue, and I said, I remember Mr. Lewenik sat there. He's left an impression with me. He was Mr. Lewenik. Mr. Lewenik used to sit behind me at the great synagogue. Some of you who are listening to this who were my contemporaries will remember Mr. Lewenik. He used to give lollies out. He used to they were delicious boiled lollies. I don't know whether they were kosher or not, but they were delicious. And he used to give lollies out behind me. He was a wonderful man. I mean, today it's quite dangerous to give lollies out to kids, but at that time, you give these lollies out, and we always, all the children would gravitate towards him. Get these lollies. I remember him. I remember Izzy Green. Who was Izzy Green? Izzy Green was a president of the Great Synagogue. Izzy Green was really very, very involved in the Great Synagogue. I think it's called, is it still called the Izzy Green Auditorium downstairs? It's after him. But these were personalities. These were people who really were dedicated to the Great Synagogue. Let me tell you, every bar mitzvah boy at the Great Synagogue at that time, every bar mitzvah boy got a set of machzorim from Izzy Green. Everyone. Whether he was invited to the bar mitzvah or not, he gave them personally a set of machzorim. And every machzor of those boys was inscribed with the following. Beautiful inscription. Can you see it? Everyone was from the, he said, with loving good wishes from Israel Green, etc. Every mitzvah boy got that. And you know what? You were proud to come back to the great every festival to show your machzor that's given by Izzy Green. I'm sure there are many out there listening to me who were my contemporaries who would have such a set of machzorim. It wasn't just one; it was a set of machzorim from Izzy Green. I say this to you that it was something. When I was at the Great Synagogue, you know, I'm a member of the Great Synagogue still because I joined. I come every Yom Kippur. I try to come every Yom Kippur now. And I was going around last Yom Kippur and I saw, was it Paul Goodman who used to sit in front of us? You know, the Goodman family who sit in front of us at the shul there. And I saw the inscription in his siddur and I said, well, remember Izzy Green? Yeah, that's from Izzy Green. So all these things leave an impression in one's. But you know, it was very formal, very formal. Izzy Green used to come with pinpoint trousers. You know, it was a black with a black coat. They were very, very formal. And of course, in the front, the board used to wear these top hats as well. In fact, I said to Justice Stephen Rothman about two Yom Kippurs ago when I first started the grade again, I went up to him and I said, Stephen, you know, I said, look, I've come back for nostalgia. I said, I can notice that the rabbi and the chazan, they're still wearing the canonicals because many shuls don't wear these anymore. They're still wearing the canonicals. But I said, but where's your top hat? I said, I don't know why that tradition has gone. So I remember the top hat. So it was very, very formal. But you know what? It gave you a sense of awe. It gave you a sense that you were in a place that this was something special. I'm not against formality. You know, today, of course, we try to make an informal service, which is good. But at the same time, formality is not a bad thing either. That's another memory I have. There was Arthur Robb, another person who was very involved in the Great Synagogue. The same formality. There was also, I remember, Norm Goodman. I don't know if you've heard of Norm Goodman. He was the secretary of the shul. He was a person. He used to teach bar mitzvah boys there. He was, and I'm sure some of you listening to this will remember Norm Goodman and his family. He was the secretary of the shul. He was also the bar mitzvah teacher of most of the mitzvah boys. There was also a shamus we had. I'm going to tell you a funny story in a second about the shamus. The shamus was Mr. Kahan. Mr. Kahan used to walk around with his canonicals, and he was a European gentleman. I'll say this to you, that tact and refinement wasn't his greatest virtue. You know, and here's the following story. What happened to Mr. Kahan? There was a consul of Israel at that time called Mr. Ashkenazi. Okay, Mr. Ashkenazi was going to come in to the shul for that Shabbos, and he was going to be escorted to the box next to the president at the front of the shul. Somebody comes in, and Mr. Kahan, in his, you know, not so tactful way, goes up to this person and says, Ashkenazi? So the person said, yes. This is an absolute true story. I tell them, Ashkenazi, yes. Come with me. And puts him beside the president in the box. And then a few minutes later, somebody else comes in, and it's the actual consul. Well, listen to this. This is absolute truth. The Ashkenazi, because he thought Ashkenazi, the fellow said, I'm I'm not Sephardi, I'm Ashkenazi. So he was put in the box. This other one put in the box. This one that said, that acknowledged he was Ashkenazi and not Sephardi, he had just come out of jail the week before. And he thought, it's absolutely true, he thought they were honoring him. And my father, who was on the board at the time, said to whoever was there, said, look, you can't move, you can't take him out of there now. It'd be a shame on this fellow. So put the other Miss Ashkenazi on the other side, the other box. That I remember. It was quite embarrassing at the time, but it was quite humorous. Stories like that. I recall also other events that took place there. As I said, many of these events have had a great impact on me as a rabbi. The Great Synagogue at that time was always it wanted to remain the best. It wanted to remain the main synagogue, in inverted commas, the cathedral synagogue of Sydney, which I regard it still as, right? The cathedral, it wanted to be the best synagogue in Sydney, the main one. And Rabbi Freilich wanted to be the main rabbi of Sydney, and he would make sure that was the situation. Let me tell you that this actually had an impact on my rabbinate. Whatever synagogue, I must say, it's that feeling of being the best, always with me as well. Whatever shul I went to, the Great Synagogue taught me my shul had to be the best. Gave me sort of competitive thing in the rabbinate, and in fact that's not a bad thing, because we're actually told by our sages, kinat sofrim tarbe chokhmah. The more competition in spiritual matters, the better it is in spirituality. So, but this also led me to another situation as well from the great. When I became rabbi of Maroubra, and there was Bible quizzes between the I don't know whether you know, but down in the Israel auditorium, every year there were Bible quizzes between the various synagogues. It was fantastic. People used to prepare for them. There was every synagogue, or most of the synagogues, and the youth groups, all of them. There were three. There was a team of three from each synagogue, and there was this night of Bible quiz was fantastic, but it was very competitive. So when I became Rabbi Maroubra, because of the competitiveness I learned from the Great Synagogue, I had to beat them. And sometimes it really led to some very fierce competition. And at the same time, also, by the way, we used to be football matches, rugby league, but between the various synagogues as well, which was very good. And whenever Maroubra played the Great Synagogue, there was fierce competition. In fact, sometimes the parents came to be quite aggressive with each other, because we always wanted to win. That was another memory I have. Another memory I have, by the way, because as I said, I went to Sydney Grammar School, and as a kid, I'm talking now with the when I was in primary school, which at that stage was Edgecliff Primary School. Down in Rush Cutters Bay, there's Weigel Oval. That's where the football field is for Sydney Grammar School. And every Shabbos, my father would take my brother and myself to the shul, to the Great, and we'd be driving along on Shabbos. I actually became a Shomer Shabbos when I became a mitzvah. I'll tell you about that soon. But we used to be driving along there, and my father would take us to the oval, because we used to play football for Sydney Grammar School early, about 9 o'clock. We would finish the game against another school, and off we'd go to shul, put our school uniform on. We used to attend the Great Synagogue in our school uniforms, very formal. And so we'd go to the Great, and on the way back, my father would be driving down William Street to take us home again. We lived in Bellevue Hill, Victoria Road, and we would drive. So when we used to see Rabbi Freilich going up the hill in William Street, my father used to say, "Duck." At least people are more honest today. Now they'll drive past me and say, "Good Shabbos, Rabbi." So that I recall that vividly as well. Another thing which I recall vividly, I'm giving sort of bits of memory here, but things which actually influenced my life, you know, because it taught me understanding and tolerance towards others, you know, and not to be judgmental towards anybody of their religious observance. It taught me that. The Great Synagogue taught me that. And also something else which I remember very sadly, actually, you know, I get very emotional, and those who see me with Ne'ilah, I get very emotional in Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur. And I could actually get quite tearful at the moment, because I remember when Rabbi Freilich, it's left an indelible mark on me. When Rabbi Freilich, his daughter, Judy Mond, was dying. She was a young woman, and she was dying, and he used to lead us in Ne'ilah. And Rabbi Freilich was a very dignified man. And you know, I used to see him, as I said, very dignified, and I never thought I would see him cry. But his daughter was dying, and I remember him saying Avinu Malkeinu at that time, and just broke down and cried and wept on the bimah. And I just saw how powerful, you know, how he felt prayer was, so powerful, coming from the heart. And since that time, whenever I daven Ne'ilah as a rabbi, I always broke down in Avinu Malkeinu, because that situation at the Great Synagogue had a profound effect on me. So that is a memory which also, you know, as I said, you know, memories are a diary that we draw on in our own lives. That was another situation. I'll tell you something else at the Great Synagogue which I remember very well, and I don't know whether you know this, but the folk library was going to, I don't know whether it actually carried it out, but they were going to take the books, a lot of the books, to the Sydney University library. And a few of the young people in the community were totally against that. They were totally against that happening, because they thought they're taking these books and they're putting them to the university, should remain in Jewish hands. There was a person called Jonathan Lester. Some of you might remember him. He gathered a number of students together, and one was a Sunday they broke into the Great Synagogue. You'll see this in the Jewish news if you want to go back and see about this. They broke into the Great Synagogue. They took these books that were going to be taken to Sydney University, and they hid them somewhere. Where did these books go? And where they had put them, you know, on the top of the Great Synagogue, the tower there, you know, on the top there, they'd hidden all the books there, but nobody knew for weeks, until finally they were discovered there. That also, I remember that very well. All these students were determined not to let these books go from the Jewish hands of the community. That's another thing which I always think about. You know, we used to have wonderful youth services there as well. Once every 6 months, we used to have a youth service. The youth would read the Torah. They would be prepared to lead the service, Musaf or Shachris. It really helped us. And Stephen Rothman, your president, would remember those very well as well. And we always used to be very honored if we were given parts of the service there, because it was a great honor to have this. And it actually taught us how to lead a service. And I owe that very much to the Great Synagogue, particularly Rabbi Lebowski. I don't know whether you know him. He passed away now, but he was the second minister there at that time, and then became Rabbi of St Kilda in Melbourne. He was very, very well, very articulate rabbi, and very good teacher. I'll tell you a bit more about him in a minute. So there was Rabbi Lebowski. There was also Reverend Gluck. As you know, Reverend Gluck, who was outstanding. He taught me a lot of the prayers that I do now, at the Nusach and how to daven. And these two used to train the boys, and Norm Goodman, who was the secretary, and we used to participate at these services, which left a wonderful impression on us and taught us how to lead a service. I don't know whether this happens anymore, but it used to happen twice a year. May I just say this to you also, that I'll tell you something very funny. When, as I said to you before, I became Shomer Shabbos after Bar Mitzvah. After my Bar Mitzvah at the Great Synagogue, I said, if I'm going to say thank you Hashem for giving us the Torah, from that time onwards, I'm going to keep the Torah. That time, so I couldn't. We were living in Bellevue Hill, so it was quite a schlep to get to the Great Synagogue. So what did I do? I occasionally, if I wanted to go to the Great, because my father had something on, or was invited to a mitzvah, etc., I would stay with the Glucks. The Glucks lived down there in, I think it was down near Ashkenazi Bay there, Elizabeth Bay. So Elizabeth Bay, and what would happen was I would stay there with them on the Friday nights and then throughout Shabbat. Now, I don't know whether you know, but at that time, where the railway is now, around opposite Ashkenazi Bay Park, there was a big stadium. It was a big Sydney stadium. And every Friday night they would have world champion wrestling there. World champion wrestling. And I would go with the Gluck boys. That was Joseph Gluck, Joseph, who you know, Harry Gluck, the late Johnny Gluck, and Nathan, and when I stayed, we would go after the Shabbat meal, and we would go down to the stadium Friday nights, and the people there knew that we couldn't pay for a ticket, so they let us go over the turnstiles to come in and watch the wrestling. I don't know whether you've heard Killer Kowalski, and there was these wrestlers. I still have wonderful memories of that. So not only was I going to go to the Great Synagogue, but it also gave me a chance to go to the wrestling. So these are memories. Can I just also mention to you that there used to be a class given by Rabbi Lebowski, who was, I said, an excellent teacher. And Rabbi Lebowski used to teach us Hebrew grammar. It was down at the Folk Library I think it was every Tuesday, every Wednesday afternoon. And there was quite a big class there. We used to do Hebrew grammar and how to translate the Chumash, how to translate the Siddur, which these things, as I said, hold you in good stead for the rest of your life. And I owe that to the Great Synagogue, because that actually helped me understand what I'm reading in the Siddur, what I'm reading in the Chumash. All these things I owe to the Great Synagogue. Another thing which I just want to share with you as well, I've got a few things which I want to mention here. There was one thing. Interesting enough, I didn't actually attend a cheder at the Great Synagogue, and the reason for that was that my father, although he was a member of the board of the Great Synagogue, and although he was very involved with the youth, etc., my father actually sent my brother and myself to the yeshiva. The yeshiva wasn't what it is today. It wasn't a Chabad yeshiva, by the way, at that stage. It was actually under Gera Hasidim. And the reason he sent us there, because my father used to say, and I'll just show you that very quickly, because my father remembered his grandfather, my great-grandfather, and I'll just show you a picture of him. 1 second. Here we are. This is my great-grandfather. Okay. So my father said, he used to say to me, I want you to be brought up in traditions of your great-grandfather. And I don't think he would have attended the Great Synagogue. so he sent us to the yeshiva to the yeshiva instead. And I remember very this has nothing to do with the Great Synagogue, but we used to go to City Grammar School. Now, very few boys who went to City Grammar School would go to the yeshiva at that stage. It was more because there was a small core. It wasn't a big core of more. I never say like to say more orthodox. Can I just say maybe stricter observant people at the yeshiva. So of course, City Grammar School has on its badge a cross. You know, it's a non-denominational school, but has it across. So I remember my brother and I used to go in the afternoons into the yeshiva at that stage, and we used to have the students there calling us all types of things because of the cross. The same wouldn't have happened at the Great Synagogue. Now, mentioning that, this another lesson I got from the Great, and that is respect for all faiths. And how did I learn this? Because I believe very much in interfaith dialogue and interfaith respect. How did I learn this? From the Great. All these things came from the Great. And you know, as I was preparing this, and I thank you for allowing me to prepare it, it actually showed me how great was the influence of the Great on my rabbinate. You know, I remember Rabbi Freilich was invited to see the Pope at St. Mary's Cathedral that time, and it was a Shabbat morning. And I remember the discussion about should he be at shul or should he go on the Shabbat to see the Pope. And I recall that discussion taking place, and Rabbi Freilich saying, "Well, I think out of respect for the Pope, I should be going to see him, and just to show respect for another faith." And that has left an indelible mark on my soul, that you know, we should respect each other. What is religion all about if we don't show respect for each other's faiths? That's what religion is. And that also comes from the Great. It didn't come from the yeshiva. It came from the Great. And there are many other things. I've got a few things here which I could also mention. 1 second. I've got some more things down here. How are we doing for time, by the way? What? We're okay? Okay, Norm Goodman I've mentioned. Yes, okay. Another thing which I learned from the Great. Walper Hospital. You know, as I mentioned to you before, I used to come back every year, and I used to go and used to do rabbinical things. When Reverend Gluck was away, I used to fill in for him. And he used to go away when I used to come back, so I could do various things at to replace him at the Great. So I recall he gave me a list at Walper Hospital to go and visit. It was the first time ever I was doing a pastoral duty of visiting the sick, and I was a bit nervous, just first time I'm doing this, and I thought, and I remember my grandmother who was visiting from New Zealand at the time said to me, "David, just go in there and just don't look sad. I know you'll feel empathy for those people who are not well. Don't feel sad. Show them pleasant face. Be warm. Smile. That's the best healing that they can have." And as I said, that actually taught me those experiences that I was representing the Great Synagogue at that time actually taught me to how to do those pastoral duties. And I owe it to the Great. Again, was totally the Great that was teaching me those things. So and another thing which I also wanted to make mention of, that on Mondays and Thursdays, every Mondays and Thursdays, I don't know whether I know you have a minyan every day there now. I'm not sure whether they had because I used to go Mondays and Thursdays to the Great. What used to happen is, used to drive from home, from Bellevue Hill, used to go to the Great on Monday and Thursday morning. There used to be a breakfast afterwards. A breakfast afterwards at the Great. It was actually prepared by, I think it was Tilly Roden. I don't know whether the Roden family are still involved at the Great, I'm not sure. It was Tilly Roden, wonderful breakfast. And I used to lane the Torah every Monday and Thursday at the Great for them at that time. But we're talking now, by the way, before I went to rabbinical college. We're talking about when I was 13, 14. And this also gave me the chance to sort of practice to read the Torah at the Great. They used to pay minyan men, because it was very hard to get a minyan at that stage. They used to pay minyan men to actually come along and be part of the minyan. I don't know whether you still have to do that, but that's what I did at that stage. But it was a lovely breakfast afterwards, so I can go right to school across the road to College Street right after the minyan in there. I have wonderful memories of that. Let me tell you something else. I'm sure you've had more rabbis coming out of the Great Synagogue now, but at that time, I think I had a slight influence on two rabbis who came out of the Great Synagogue. There's Rabbi Aryeh Leib Solomon. He's younger than me, and he actually got more involved as he saw that I was pursuing the rabbinate. He graduated as a rabbi. And there was also Rabbi Mark Solomon. And there's a family, I think the family is still there, Solomon family. And he became a rabbi from Jews College London. Again, I taught him as well. So there's a few rabbis actually came out from the Great Synagogue. And we were all, as I said, the Great Synagogue had an influence on all of us. So that really, it's something which I will always remember and always appreciate. Just trying to think of anything else. Maybe 1 second. Pardon me? Yeah. Is there any questions, by the way?
We'll have question time when you're done, Rabbi. If you would like to go on another 5 minutes, and then we'll stop for questions. That's okay with you?
Okay. I'm just going to see. I've got some more things here. Which one of these? Which one? Oh, yes. My wife just reminded me of something as well, which yeah. I think it's something which they had at the Great Synagogue, which I think is sad that it's lacking today. They used to have dances Saturday nights in the Izzy Green Auditorium. People used to come from all around, young people from all around to those dances. And you know what? Many shidduchim occurred as a result of those. Unfortunately, today, I think it's a bad thing that can you hear me now? Okay. Unfortunately, many synagogues have become more to the right and don't have these dances anymore. There used to be the mainstream synagogues used to have these dances for young people. And in my estimation, I think it was a bad thing stopping them because people thought, oh, it's not right that a synagogue has such dances. But you know what? I think it was a great thing. It was a great thing because it actually brought young people together. And as I said, many shidduchim came from those situations. I once gave a talk at a rabbinical conference, and I said there's such a thing as pekuach nefesh, which means you can actually break Shabbat to save life, because human life is greater than anything else. But I said, what about pekuach neshama, saving souls? What can you do? What should we do to be able to save souls? I said, surely having dances in our synagogues would justify, we having shidduchim and get our young people together, that we can have our young people actually coming and meeting each other and eventually maybe becoming partners. Surely that is far more important than saying, oh, why should there be dances in our synagogues? So that's one thing I remember of the Great Synagogue. It did bring a lot of people together. Another thing which I also remember very fondly, and that is there was a thing called the Pep and Sparkle Review. They used to have every year at the Great Synagogue a play. They used to be various. It used to be down in the auditorium, a wonderful review, a play, a musical. It was a musical. And the words were, I remember they used to, I'd forgotten the actual tune, but said, grab your coat and grab your hat, leave your worries on your doorstep, just direct your shoe to the Pep and Sparkle Review. and it was a great thing. People would come along and it would be packed. And it would also bring young people together. So all these things, they're probably not there today, but interestingly enough, I look at these things and I have nostalgia of all these things of the great. But I want to say one thing here, and I gave a drasha last Shabbat. Of course, in life we always look at memories at the past. And I gave an example because of the Jewish people when they came out of Egypt, and last week said, were they saying, Zochreinu Ogo, we remember the fish we used to have in Egypt. We know that they had no fish in Egypt. They all had was matzah, but they said, please give us better food because we remember the fish we used to have in Egypt. So the rabbis asked, they say, well, what fish did they have in Egypt? They just had matzah. And the answer is that unfortunately, you know, those were the days, my friend, as that song goes. Those were the days. We always think back, and we always think we forget the hard times. Then we only remember the blessings at that time. In the present, we only think of of what we don't have rather than what we have. So what I'm saying is, although those times, and said the wonderful programs we used to have at that time was great, was really great. And by the way, you know, it's interesting when I go on Yom Kippur now to the Great Synagogue, I see all those people I used to interact with. There was the Milstons, Phillips, you know, Peter Phillips there, who I see at the Great Synagogue, the Greens, Rothman, Rothmans. I remember there were the Candys, the Einfields at that time. I don't see them, but Sid Einfield used to be there, sitting beside us. And I recall all these people. When I'm at the Great, I look there and I see in my mind, I see all those people which one of you? Oh yes, John Gilston. He did my bris. Ron Gilston, Dr. Ron Gilston did my bris. I don't remember that, thank God. But he actually used to sit in front of us in shul there, right, the Gulston row, the Goodmans. So I remember all these things. But you know what? As I said, we always look at the past and we say those were the days, because we even distort it sometimes. But the present Great Synagogue, when I go there now, it's just as good, and I see the same people. And I really wanted to join the Great Synagogue again because, you know, though it really is part of my life. It influenced so much in my life, as I just showed you in this talk. It influenced so much in my life, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciated this chance just to share with you some of those memories, which, as I said, had a great and profound influence on my rabbinate. So thank you for listening.
Rabbi, thank you so much. This is amazing. I have two comments. The first is, have you thought about putting all this down in writing? These are memories that need to be kept, preserved, really, really. So that's a thought I want to put into your head if you haven't got it there already.
Well, Sharon, I've actually putting all these things down. That's what I'm doing.
Wonderful.
In my, I don't call it retirement. See, I call it coming out of retirement. See, retirement is when you retire into your profession. I'm now out of retirement and enjoying the things I want to do in life, and I am putting all these things down. I just want to show you an interesting thing. I've just here I've actually got my Bar Mitzvah album. And I'll just show everybody Rabbi Freilich. One second, here he is. I'll just take this out and I'll show you this. This is you see Rabbi Freilich there?
Yeah.
That's Rabbi Freilich beside me. I'm talking at my mitzvah, and here's Rabbi Lebowski. He was quite a personality, Rabbi Lebowski. I don't know whether you've seen pictures. Have you seen pictures of him? One second, I'll just find here. Where is it? Let's see. Rabbi Lebowski. And here's Rabbi Lebowski at my Bar Mitzvah reception. Just to show you it was me with them.
And one of the things that I've noticed during your talk that I haven't seen with other talks is, as I was looking at everybody who's here attending, to show how you really got through to everyone. All I saw the entire time was heads nodding and nodding and nodding. They were all remembering along with you. You have really touched so many people's hearts. I have Paul and Dion Drexler have written in the chat box, and I'll read it to you. Do you remember, Rabbi, when you officiated together with Jeremy Lawrence when our daughter Michelle married Paul Levitt from Perth? You made my wife and I cry under the chuppah. It's the most amazing memory for us.
Oh, well, I do remember that very well, because it was a union between a great synagogue and Perth, which delighted me and uplifted me. So I remember it very well. So thank you for that.
Now, if anybody else would like to share a memory or just make a comment or ask a question, please unmute yourselves. There's new privacy issues, and Lauren, our administrator, cannot unmute you. So if you want to say something, just click the unmute button, and the floor is open to everybody now.
Can I just say this? As far as Justice Stephen Rothman is concerned, he was bar mitzvah. I think it was 1 week, and we can correct me on this. It was 1 week before me. He was Parshas Noach, and I was Parshas Lech Lecha. So, and I remember hearing him laning. He laned excellently. We both did a sidra. We both did the whole sidra. So I remember him laning excellently, and I said, and I remember the following week I said, I've got to do better than him. That was a competitive spirit.
That's lovely. So, okay, Lynn, if you unmute yourself, can you, the little blue box at the top right of your screen, if you click on that,
got it.
There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Rabbi, was lovely talk. It just reminds me of the lovely times with your mum. You just sound just like her.
Thank you. That's a compliment. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Lovely
Thank you.
family. I remember being at Sarah's wedding. You're a lovely, lovely family.
Well, thank you so much for that. And as I said,
I got married since I saw you in Perth. My husband.
Hi.
really, hi there. Hi.
I was in Gilbert with friend of your
Mazel
mum.
tov. Fantastic. It's good to hear good news, and always good to hear about simchas. Always good to hear about simchas.
Okay.
Any other questions? You can ask me about anything.
Rabbi, you decried the fact that the executive no longer wear top hats. Well, unfortunately, I have to wear a top hat every year for the law service. And I can tell you it is most uncomfortable. The inside of the hat is wood. There's a wooden rim on the inside. And it's hard enough, I gather, to get people to serve on the executive as it is without torturing them every service.
No, I'm not saying that they should revert to the top hats, but what I am saying is it did give us a sense of awe somehow. It was I don't know, it made shul something extra special. Absolutely. I mean, I remember there was a Alroy Cohen. Some of you of my age will remember that Alroy Cohen was there. He was a very, very lovely man. There was, I just think of all of them. I can see them actually in my head as I'm sitting there. How shul leaves an impression on you when you're young and you go there. It really does leave an impression on you.
Can you hear me?
John Len, go ahead, John Len.
Yeah. There was a cohort of dignified old gentlemen. The late Max Freilich, your grandfather, was one of them, who would never turn up at the Great Synagogue on Shabbat without a black jacket, striped pants,
That's right.
and a Homburg. Unless, of course, they were wearing a top hat in the box. But there was Elroy M. Cohen, QC,
Right, that's right.
Maury Rosenblum, Chaim Owen,
Right.
and your grandfather's very good friend, Mr. Horace Newman.
That's right. I remember.
And many others. And just a couple of other words. Firstly, it's really good that you come to the Great for Yom Kippur. I love your Haftarah in the morning. Apparently, talk about St. Mary's Cathedral. Apparently, the people over at St. Mary's Cathedral can hear it quite well. Anyway.
that was the idea.
But But I need to pull you up on one point. You said you didn't attend the Cheder at Great Synagogue, but I distinctly remember you there. In fact, you turned up on the morning after your bar mitzvah, which caused a bit of a sensation. On Sunday morning, you turned up for Tefillin Club. But we used to have a nickname for you there, behind your back. We used to refer to you as Rabbi Freilich.
Yeah, well, they called me that at Sydney Grammar School too.
Yeah, because you did a mighty mean ashrei. I can remember quite clearly.
No, you're right. I did attend the Tefillin Club. It was to be a Tefillin Club there. I remember that very well, very well. You know, you remember Rabbi Lebowski and there was also Reverend Meyer-Rovitz. Remember him, Reverend Meyer-Rovitz?
Reverend Meyer-Rovitz, and of course Mr. Rothfeld.
Now, 100%, yes. Yeah. Can I also make mention of something which I should have mentioned as well? I don't know whether you know this. Now I'm talking this before I was even born. My grandfather told me, talking about Max Freilich, told me an interesting thing. When my grandfather came to Sydney, and that was actually late 1920s, before the war, came out from Europe. The Great Synagogue was not very welcoming to him. And the reason the Great Synagogue wasn't very welcoming to him, because he was a Zionist. And at that stage, this is absolutely history. At that stage, the Great Synagogue, in fact, if you were a rabbi and you spoke about Israel, you'd be out. Because and there was a case, a rabbi who was about Israel, they got rid of him. Because there had to be this loyalty to the British Commonwealth. Britain was against the state of Israel. They were the establishment state of Israel, and therefore, if you mentioned Israel, you were actually in trouble.
Your grandfather was a noted Zionist, wasn't
he? He was absolutely. That was his main thing. He started the Zionist Federation. He started the UAA and the JNF in Sydney. And first when
he was well known to the heroes of early Israel in Israel. He was known to Chaim Weizmann, David Ben-Gurion, and all the others.
In fact, he hosted David Ben-Gurion when David Ben-Gurion came to Sydney. I don't really know he came to Sydney when he was head of the Jewish Agency. So what happened was he was not very well received, my grandfather, because he had this Zionist leaning, and my grandfather told me this. But what happened was, after some time, when he started to establish himself in business, etc., and he became more acceptable, then he became more involved with the Great, because he was always involved with the Great, but at that stage, then they sort of accepted him more, and the whole idea of Zionism was more popular at that time. So that's an interesting fact about the Great. You know, in Perth here, and also there was also not a suspicion, but they didn't like European Jews much because you know, you've got to show that you assimilate. They didn't like them anywhere because there was English. You know, the English, you had to show that you were very English and assimilated. And if you came from Europe, and also in Perth, the same thing happened. When you came from Europe, it was an embarrassment to them to see these European Jews. And in fact, in Perth, they paid $10 or £10 at that stage to move them on. To move them to Sydney. They did not want them here. They came to Fremantle, they moved them on. The Great Synagogue also had the same idea. But and I always told them here that if you would have accepted them, we would have been the Melbourne of Australia. You had to accept it because the first port of call was at Fremantle here in WA. But they moved them on because they were too European. Interesting. Just a bit of history.
Wow, that is fascinating.
David.
Mike Medill, I think you want to say something.
Mike Medill. Hi, Mike Medill.
How are you?
You now sit in front of me at Shul. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
But I don't have the same seat as I used to, because it was unfortunately when I went to get a seat at the Shul, they told me where my parents and grandparents were all taken, so I had to get the next row up. But now you're in front of me.
Yes, I can remember our days from GSY camp.
Yep.
We were together when you actually met Aviva at the camp.
Right.
And
You
I
remember
had the pleasure, I had the pleasure of attending your wedding and the Shiva Bruchas after the wedding in your father's home in Bellevue Hill. And that's, I still have a vivid memory of those things. It was an absolutely lovely affair.
What was I pretty accurate with my memories? Was I pretty accurate with the memories? Remember the Pepper Sparkle
Shiva
review?
Bruchas that I attended afterwards at their father's house in Bellevue Road at that time,
Victoria Road.
after the wedding. That was
That's right.
really,
Well,
really something. But we
good
have a long, and all the memories that you bring back from GSY, and we did have 360 years in the hall. Those were the days.
Those were the
You would
days.
never get it
Those
today.
were the days, my friend. But unfortunately, we shouldn't say that those were the days. Now we've got the present days, and we've got to make the most of the present days and make sure that we're successful and the Great Synagogue is still great, even in the present days.
Thank you. All the best.
All of it.
Viva too.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Michael. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Anybody else
No.
have any comments? If not, Rabbi Freilich, that was just amazing. I'm just so touched by everything I've heard. I've learned so much. You know, we've only been at the Great for about the last 10 years, so much of this is new to us. And I just know that you've brought back such wonderful memories to so many of the people who are here today. And we want to thank you, so very, very much for your time.
Well,
And to
I want to
Aviva
thank
for joining us.
well, I'm glad she was there because she also brought memories to me. She was making me remember a few things as well. No, I just want to say that I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this, because it's wonderful to be able to sort of reflect back. And when you reflect back, you actually do understand yourself more. You understand, the why you do certain things and why you have certain attitudes in your life. And you've given me the opportunity to do that, all of you, because to be able to present this, because it actually made clear to me a lot about my rabbinate and why I did certain things. Because it was the great influence I had from the great. Thank you.